What's up, guys? It's Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. I want to officially welcome back the Renegades to the XFL. To all the players of the Renegade squad, I can't wait to see you represent Arlington, and we'll be rooting for you. To Danny and DJ, let me know if you guys need any help with that quarterback warm-up, if you smell what I'm cooking.
Really excited to be in Arlington. People here have been fantastic.
Appreciate everybody coming out.
This is fun. This will be exciting. Good to see you folks.
Over here, the boys are all outfitted up.
What a great sports community.
I love it.
It's exciting to be back. I've had a lot of big moments through the years and hope to have more to come here with the Renegades. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
I think the XFL starts in St. Louis. Just Google Battlehawks and all you see is the fans. But you're going to get a brand of football that's going to be fun to watch. If you guys want football, we brought it back, we're going to give it to you. Man, I want to win a championship. Bottom line, that's not what I'm doing.
Thank you so much for bringing this team down here. I can take my son to football. It's going to be nice.
But we want your son to see those guys and bring football in totality back to St. Louis in its rightful place. I promise you, do everything I can to bring you some great players. All I ask you guys is to show up. Be there.
Here we go.
Calls it all, man.
This area is going to go berserk for you guys.
How's it going? How you doing?
You don't always see coaches who are active in their community, but he's already showing us right now by hosting this event that he's going to be a coach that's really big on community service and those community partners. And so I'm really, really excited about the opportunities that he's going to allow for our football team as well for the community to be involved with the team.
I don't care what that score is. Give me all you got. Save nothing. Let's leave it all on the field and let the better team win. As a player, we feed off the energy of the fans. So the more you guys are into it and you give us that 12th man advantage out on the football field, we'll win some ball games. At the end of the day, I want everybody to be able to fulfill their dreams, to say that they played at the next level. And I think with the staff that I've assembled, I got Joey Porter, I got Paul Spicer, they've been there, they know what it takes. Our slogan and our coaching staff, we rise together, we rock forever. That's our whole thing. But it all comes down to who we draft, because our job as coaches is to put our players in the best position to go out there and have success. So we're going to cater to our players in that sense, schematically. The draft is coming up, man. This thing will be here before you know it. We're going to be the San Antonio Brahmas, and we're here to stay, and we're going to do all that we can to bring home a championship.
You look at his resume, it's incredible what he brings to the world of football. Welcome, Terrell Butler.
When we out there, we playing to win. And when you look at that logo, you think about all that. We play 60 minutes. If you don't want to play 60 minutes, don't show up. We're going to keep our head down, we're going to keep grinding, and we're going to try to do what we do. Can you make plays? Will you compete? Will you work? That's all that matters. I think you guys are going to be pretty excited when you find out who's going to be on the team. We have a database of over 1,800 players that we've already scouted. I've been ready to lead young men like Coach Bowden led us. I feel like the opportunity I had to take, and I'm so excited. Everything that we're doing right now is different, and the whole team is first class. Smart, fast, fearless. Orlando Guardians, all Orlando Guardians, we're gonna light that scoreboard up too.
What is up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the XFL Week in Review. I'm your host, Mark Perry, editor of XFL News Hub, your spring football media guru. On this week's show, The Rock comments on the XFL's decision to pass on New York. TSN CFL insider Dave Naylor talks CFL playoffs, The Rock, Larry Tannenbaum, MLSC. You're not going to want to miss it. There's a lot. We touch on every single hot button issue you could think of when it comes to the CFL and XFL chatter over the last year. It is a great conversation. We appreciate him for being on the show, plus so much more. So remember, before we get all this thing going, if you like football, then like and subscribe to our channel. Let's get this episode to 70 likes. Hit that notification bell to get alerted when we go live and when we post new content. We appreciate that for you guys tuning in today because, we got the Ravens game is happening, we are live 8 p.m. Eastern. So we got the Ravens game coming up. So if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@XFL News Hub with your thoughts or record an MP3 or video on your phone. We'll play it on next week's show or leave a voicemail 888-430-7692 extension 3. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it on the show, Stitcher, Audible, Player FM, Spotify, Google Podcasts as well. And we are live. XFL Week in Review at 8 p.m. Eastern every Monday on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Timeline, my friends. Timeline. 102 days from XFL kickoff. Okay, that's cool. Next week, XFL QB assignments. XFL draft November 16th and 17th. Then January 9th, XFL training camp begins. February 18th, we kick off. So next week is a huge week because it is essentially less than 100 days and it's draft week. So here's what's going to happen next week here on XFL News Hub and with XFL Week in Review. Because we got a jam-packed, not only we got Dave Naylor coming in talking all sorts of interesting stuff when it comes to the XFL and CFL stuff from the past, what's going forward, how the players, the XFL draft, which is happening next week, how that can impact CFL players, the whole gambit. We go over that. But next week, there's no live show because I got a family thing going on. However, reporter pre-draft roundtable will take place. That's on Monday. So we're going to get together. All of the reporters from XFL News Hub are going to get together, and we're going to talk XFL draft, QB assignments, everything. That's coming out Monday night. Unless we hear, we'll see if anything news breaks this week. But we're going to have all the reporters roundtable on Monday night. Tuesday night, we're going to go live. Wednesday, we're going to go live. Thursday, we're going to go live. All with XFL News Hub reporters all week long. Just want to point that out. All week long. That's right, XFL. That's going to be a huge week. So basically, you're going to get us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll put all the stuff in the podcast as well. So you'll get the reporter roundtable. All of our group, we're going to get together, talk about the team names, whatever's going on from here until then. Quarterbacks, whatever we're just going to get to. We'll have a nice, cool reporter roundtable. That won't be live Monday, but Tuesday after the quarterback assignments, we'll go live with your reaction. And then we've got live Wednesday night, live reaction when it comes to the draft. Then Thursday night, same thing, recap of the draft. So you got a full packed week. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Also, a couple of things. I got my DC Defender season tickets. Super excited. Got actually a little bit better seats than I did before. I was, you don't know how much that meant to me to be able to get season tickets again. It is very rare in this universe that we live in that, something goes out of business and declares bankruptcy, especially when it comes to spring football, because it is a wasteland of failed leagues to actually just talk about was it Major League Football? Remember that over the summer? To actually come back, and not only come back, we're lucky enough to be able to have, a team here in DC. So DC Defenders are back. So I was able to get my DC Defender season tickets. Also, I said I was going to be at the DC Defenders event. You saw a video there. You saw videos at the beginning of the show, all the different events that took place with the XFL last week. Wanted to be there. Two of my daughters are cheerleaders. They had a playoff game on a Thursday, which is the first. We've been around for years in this area. Never was there, and it was a home game. So basically, it was my girls' last home game as cheerleaders. They're both seniors heading off to college. I couldn't miss that. That was the last one. But it's so funny because every step of this journey with the XFL, every event, it's been some kind of family thing. And some people would just quit and give up. I just think that there's bigger things to come, and it's just the timing is not right. But that's all out of the way. So we don't have to worry about that. So the next event, I can't promise. I assume if it's something else, I will be there. As long as it's some senior night, big once in a lifetime thing. But I had to be there for their final game. Also, USFL Weekend Review is coming out this week. There's a lot of chatter talking about this Memphis hub, maybe the Tampa Bay Bandits switching to Memphis Showboats. We have all that. We have some great guests on the show. That's going to take place later on this week. USFL Weekend Review. You're going to want to check out that as well. All right, so we got the schedule for next week. We've got the DC season Defender season tickets. I saw a lot of people posting about their season tickets. Super excited for that. That's just in itself crazy. It's been quiet ever since the stuff had come out about the team names and logos. I promise you, there will be more news this week, including XFL player contracts. That's coming up Thursday night at the latest. Our own Anthony Miller will be reporting on that, and he will give that to you sometime Thursday night. So stay tuned. If nothing else happens, Thursday night, there's definitely going to be some news dropping about the XFL. All right, my friends. So we're going to go through the week, a couple of news stories this week. Then we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll get our conversation with TSN, CFL insider Dave Naylor. You're not going to want to miss that. Then we'll wrap it up with your reaction on the little bit of social media stuff and talking with you guys in the chat room. Appreciate you guys, all that you do. All right, so without further ado, folks, I don't think I'm missing anything. I'm like, okay, did I miss anything? Let's just get into the week that was the XFL. The Rock comments on the XFL's decision to pass on New York. So in a candid moment with a heartbroken fan, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson took to social media to explain why the New York Guardians weren't returning to the XFL reboot in 2023. Unless you've been living under a Dwayne Johnson. This is, of course, Mike Mitchell wrote this. Just want to point that out. That was not my joke. It's been public knowledge since earlier this year that the latest iteration of the XFL would not have the New York Guardians returning, or LA for that matter. 3 XFL cities from 2020 are gone: New York, Tampa, and Los Angeles. And in their place are Orlando, Vegas, and San Antonio. Mike Mitchell, of course, reported on this a long, long time ago. Despite the reports here on XFL News Hub, many XFL 2020 devotees were in denial or dismissive of the idea that New York in particular would return to the league. However, Guardians loyalists got hit with reality when the XFL officially announced their cities on July 24th, 2020. 2. New York has now 100% confirmed out by the XFL. 3 months later, on Halloween, after much debate and accidental website leak by the league, the XFL released its team names and logos for the 8 cities: Arlington Renegades, Houston Roughnecks, San Antonio Battlehawks, DC Defenders, Seattle Sea Dragons, Vegas Vipers, San Antonio Brahmas, and Guardians of Orlando. That's right, Guardians. Gotham's Gargoyle is gone. Neon, and like most lifelong New Yorkers, has retired in Florida. That is a good one. That is a good one. The New York Guardians in 2020 had a contending team and a passionate fan base and drew good ratings in the country's biggest TV market. On Fox, New York's game with Tampa on February 9th, 2020 was the high water mark for XFL viewership 2 years ago. It wasn't the league's opening game on ABC, which typically produces the highest sample audience of these type of entities. The Sunday afternoon Guardians Vipers averaged a 2.1 rating, 3.39 million viewers, the largest audience for a non-NFL football game since Week 6 of the original XFL in 2001, 3.67 million. However, ratings aside, Guardians' attendance were modest at best. In only 2 games, New York averaged 14,875 fans per game, second to last in the XFL in 2020, only ahead of LA. Do you see a correlation, my friends? The 14,000 average is a decent number for a brand new team in an upstart league with largely unknown players, especially considering the drawback of bitter cold Northeast weather in February, agreed. But the ominous confines of MetLife Stadium, which seats 82,000, made Guardian fans an eyesore for the XFL. It provided a poor visual representation to the mainstream sports audience who's sampling the league. There's no doubt that the XFL has made the incorrect choice of playing at MetLife an overriding decision that came from then XFL owner Vince McMahon. So Vince wanted in New York, and no matter what. Some naysayers certainly believe it was foolhardily to lure tri-state area football fans to embrace a non-NFL product. The lack of attendance helped fuel their beliefs. Notwithstanding all that, there was hope that the New York Guardians would find a new playing home in the future seasons, but the task of accomplishing that was easier said than done, and the economics of fielding the biggest of the big city teams was certainly a deterrent for the league's new ownership group headed by Jerry Cardinale, Redbird Capital Partners, Danny Garcia, and Dwayne Johnson. In an exchange on Twitter, the New York Guardians fans Eric Francisco, The Rock, revealed the reasoning behind the XFL not taking up shop in New York in 2023. Dwayne Johnson cited economic and stadium issues as why New York wasn't chosen for the reboot, but he promised that the XFL would revisit New York down the road. Eric wrote, devastating. The New York Guardians didn't survive the Rock's reboot of the XFL. Inspired by the gargoyles and Gothic architecture, they had a tough but clean look and made them like a team from Batman's Gotham City. I was so excited for them in 2020 while missed. DJ says, me too, brother. Trust me, we tried so hard to keep our New York team. I started my career in New York, so I'm a big advocate. Economics plus, we had a real challenge finding a proper home stadium for our hardworking, passionate players. We'll revisit it down the road 100%. So the door might be open for XFL expansion into New York in the future, but it has closed for the New York Guardians forever, with Orlando adopting the brand of its own. Still did not adopt the color scheme, so that could be something to keep a light out there. So New York Guardians, at least Dwayne Johnson kind of gave you an idea, and it's something that we've talked about too with LA and New York. It's economics. It is expensive to run franchises in those cities when you're trying to start off. Hub in Texas, having 3 teams in Texas makes sense to keep the costs down, the travel. Just ask the NFL how they plan on doing NFL Europe. The question is, what are we going to do about the Vegas Vipers? Is another thing. But now at least you understand why New York, but the door is not closed. So you could still follow the league, still wear your merch. Your team is now the DC Defenders, so I've given you all New Yorkers can now come on. All those 14,000 folks can now come and be a DC Defenders fan. But the door is not closed for all these cities that eventually they might have an XFL team. We scooped this up checking out the trademark site. So XFL had some alternate team logos that appeared. So with the week that fans are finally rejoicing with team names and logos for the 2023 season, XFL insider Mike Mitchell was able to get his hands on secondary logos before they were pulled. After Monday's announcements, these images started to appear on trademark sites. The team names, main logos, and secondary logos appeared, but we stumbled upon some alternate logos the league has not released yet. So first, this one it was under the Vipers thing, but kind of looks like a New Orleans logo. I'm not really sure what the deal is with that. Alternate St. Louis Battlehawk, Seattle Sea Dragons. Alternate looks a little bit more tougher than the other Dragons. The San Antonio Brahmas things look pretty cool. And the DC Defenders, kind of a DC flag. Now, there could be more to come, and we'll keep this page updated if they do. We haven't seen anything yet. Will the league use these or not is the question. We'll find out once the full uniforms come out. Now, each trademark included the standard language. It also included NFT, metaverse, fantasy football, and more. If you want to check out the full super nerdy, it even contained CD-ROMs. Okay, so that's what this trademark looked like. But these are some alternate logos. Maybe they'll appear somewhere else on the team things. One of the things about the logos to keep in mind, it seems like the primary logo, they wanted to have a kind of letter involved with that, and that's why you've got the Seattle Sea Dragons versus D, because Seattle doesn't start with a D. Sea Dragons starts with an S. I think they wanted to do something like that, and that's why the Renegades isn't the guy's face, but it's actually an R. So I think they wanted to have a letter representing the team name. These secondary logos we'll have to keep an eye on and see how they kind of fit into the picture in the future. The Las Vegas Vipers have arrived, but where will they play? This is from our Brandon Anderson. Excited to have the Vegas Vipers back. They officially launched all this stuff. The Halloween was when Las Vegas finally got its identity. The Vipers are returning to the XFL, but not as you imagine. This time, the Las Vegas Vipers are on the other side of the country, and they are ready to strike any opponent. Instead of being in Tampa Bay waters, they're making their home in the Nevada desert. With the Vipers team name returning, it is unknown if the league will keep Tampa Bay Vipers stats heading into the XFL 3.0 season when we kick off in 2023. That is a great question. What are they going to do with the stats than the fact that the season didn't finish? They have to I thought you should, no matter the XFL 1, 2, or 3, you should recognize all the stats, just in my opinion. Or if this is a brand new team with no relation to the 2020 season, we know that the Vipers are currently facing the fact that they don't have a home. And things just got a lot more complicated. But first, he goes over the introduction to the Vipers, the new colors, and and what Rod Woodson opening it up thing. And I think everything looks great visually for the Las Vegas Vipers. The Vegas Vipers, actually. I think that's what they're calling themselves, not Las Vegas, but Vegas. I'm not sure. But the biggest issue with the Las Vegas Vipers is when the city of Las Vegas was announced as an XFL city back at the XFL Town Hall in July 25th, 2022 at Texas Live. There was a tidbit about the Las Vegas team that their location in Las Vegas would be TBA to be announced. It's now 3 months later and 3.5 months away from the kickoff, and every possible stadium in Las Vegas has been a no-go for the XFL. Let's break down some of the top locations in Vegas where everyone expected them to play. So Sam Boyd Stadium, it seemed like the perfect reunion of the XFL and the Las Vegas city to live a nostalgic past of the memories of the 2001 with the Las Vegas Outlaws and the average 22,618 fans that attended the Outlaws game. Still, that hope halted when we learned that UNLV took a deal with Allegiant Stadium, where for compensation nearly up to $3.5 million over a 10-year period of time, UNLV will not allow any event held there with no compete clause, has eliminated any dream that the XFL return to Sam Boyd Stadium. So essentially it is closed. That's out. Sam Boyd is out. Las Vegas Ballpark, a baseball stadium, and another excellent option where the NFL recently held Pro Bowl events at the stadium last year and turned it into a football field before the NFL. Bishop Gorman versus Liberty a prep football game was held at the stadium. But in recent talks reported on slvsportsbiz.com, Aviators president Don Logan told them, quote, "It doesn't fit here," and suggested the XFL look at Cashman Field as Vipers' home, even though in prior interviews, Don Logan was quoted saying the ballpark could be transformed into a mid-sized venue for high school football and other special events, and that it, quote, depends on the event, but I think we have to do stuff like that, close quote. Allegiant Stadium, the home of the Las Vegas Raiders. When the first idea came back at the end of July, Brendan had personally questioned it off the bat. I've heard numerous stories from friends who have attended WWE SummerSlam concerts, Las Vegas Raider games. The cost of everything, including tickets, is so high that there's no way the XFL could attempt to have the same price for tickets as other teams for the 2023 season if they were to be at Allegiant Stadium. This is just the case with what LVSportsBiz.com reported in the same article. It seems like their Raiders Allegiant Stadium would have too many seats and be too expensive to rent for XFL games, close quote. So where does that leave the XFL? Cashman Field, the former baseball stadium, turned into soccer team and home of the Las Vegas Lights FC with a 10,000-seat stadium located in the heart of downtown Vegas. Cashman Field is, at this point, the XFL's last option before they have to go into panic mode after a lot has fallen apart. Wanted to dive into why this may be the best choice for the Vipers. With some research, found that the seating chart and space around the stadium, they could partner up with the Las Vegas Lights FC. The latter currently call the stadium home and add fixed bleachers on the opposite side of the field, as the XFL did in 2019 and 2020. For it is now known as Choctaw Stadium in Arlington, which added 4,000 fixed seats to the former home of the Texas Rangers. Now, with this move, it's possible to get the attendance more towards the 14,000 to 15,000, suppose not, maybe. This could help potentially unknown market for spring football to fill up the stadium. With less attendance, it looks better on television and in person. Can the Vegas Viper move into Cashman Field and build a fan base like that, like the Las Vegas Lights FC has? We'll find out. Now, the Las Vegas Vipers Twitter account has recently posted about tickets and how you can get tickets for the Vipers as low as $20 a game, promoted season tickets pre-sale, everything that the other teams are doing. Will Las Vegas Vipers secure a stadium before the fans get to choose their seats and guarantee their season tickets? This Friday, the league started sending out season ticket charts. Prices were reported by yours truly, Mark Perry, and other people have reported those too about season tickets coming out. Still, one thing to note, Las Vegas has no email go out to fans, including Brendan, who pre-ordered season tickets for Las Vegas. One thing to note is that season ticket sales start for the general public on November 16th. That's next week, the same day as the XFL draft, which is taking place in Las Vegas. With details still being determined about this draft overall, is a situation league faced with possibly pushing away season ticket holders if something is not set in stone soon. If he was a better man, which he's not, he would see the announcement from the league on the Las Vegas location within this week. Stay tuned to XFL News Hub for all the breaking news. But as of today, the 17th, we still do not know where the Las Vegas Vipers are going to play. All right, we'll take a commercial break and be right back with our Dave Naylor interview. Stay tuned, my friends.
Fan-controlled football. You heard that right. Fan-controlled football. A real football league with real players controlled by real fans. All in real time. Register to try out at fcf.io.
What's up, XFL Army? If you're a fan of the XFL News Hub and you have a telephone, which I know all of you do because you're sitting there playing on your phones all the time, then why not download the XFL News Hub app? That's right, it's on iTunes. It's on Android. We have an Android version and an iPhone version of the XFL News Hub app. So what do you get? You get the latest news from XFL News Hub, the premier source of XFL news in the universe. Plus, you get push notifications when we have breaking news. You will be the first to know. You can leave a comment on some of the news right from your phone. Plus, you get this podcast on your phone as well. Remember, you can leave us reviews on the Google Play Store or iTunes. It links to other social media, our other social media accounts, and so much more. Be in the know. I know you're on your phones. People are on their phones all the time. They never get off their phones. So why not just download the XFL News Hub app on your Android or iPhone today? All you need to do is go to the Google Play Store or iTunes and just type in XFL News Hub. That's XFL News Hub. Download our app on your phone today. All right, I'm here with Dave Naylor, TSN CFL insider, and a member of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame, I want to point out. Welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so finally we get to meet and talk CFL, XFL, all kinds of stuff. So the question I always ask my guests when they come on is, give us your superhero origin story. How did you get from high school kid to, in journalism, then in the media, then now, a member of the Canadian Football Hall of Fame?
Oh boy, how long you got? I don't want to take up your whole show, but I will try. Like a lot of people who get into sports journalism, I think it's because you realize pretty early in life you're never going to find yourself onto the field or onto the ice.
Yes.
You say, well, how can I get paid to be around sports if I'm not actually good enough to play? And so you start thinking media. And I was one of those people who actually really thought sports media very early in life. Both my parents were competitive athletes. My dad is in the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame. My mom was a runners-up pairs champion in figure skating. So I come from a sports family. But I got very little of the genetics that made my parents good athletes, unfortunately. My sister got even less, so I can't be too bitter. But I really got from them a deep appreciation of sports. I did a degree in journalism at Carleton University in Ottawa. I was the sports editor and the editor-in-chief of the paper there. My honors journalism project was actually a 23-minute documentary on a semi-pro football team that was playing 4-down football in an all-American league at that time.
Oh.
So I was kind of, I guess I had a bit of a lean towards football. My biggest thing was honestly with football. I love football. I've loved Canadian football, NFL football, college football since I've been a kid. But part of what I got into football is just the life is better than, like, I was a baseball addict as a high school kid. And you get into the profession, you're like, wait a minute. They play every day. Like, and spring training starts on February 23rd. And the World Series just ended, November 5th? Like, I have covered some baseball in my life. And, leaving the ballpark at 1 a.m. and having to be back by noon the next day, every day, I did not think was the lifestyle for me. I like better a sport that plays once a week. And more, and not only just that, but the games are so much more meaningful in football. There's never a football game that you can't draw something out of because of the significance of every game. So I started out as an intern at the Globe and Mail. I jumped to CBC Radio. I freelanced for 5 years, in which I did radio, TV, newspapers, long form, short form. I would love to tell you I was smart enough to figure out that the future of media was really going to depend on the versatility of journalists, and that's why I trained myself to be a multimedia journalist. That is not the case. I couldn't get a job, so like for 5 years I just did whatever, and by accident that turned into a really good training ground, because the world is now about, can you write long form, can you break news, can you interview, can you host, can you whatever. And so I've worked in radio, television, and writing print or online journalism for quite a while. And without ever playing a down of football or coaching a down of football, I shouldn't say, I did a 4-day mini camp with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 1995 when I was 27 years old. Got myself into shape, went to camp for 4 days. That's the extent of my football playing. But for a good part of the last 30 years, I have every day just talked football with people who are football people. So, but through osmosis, I gained a lot of knowledge about the job. I, covered the pursuit of Canadians trying to make the National Football League, consistently over the last 30 years, along with covering the CFL, and I've just really developed a great appreciation for both the sport and the people in it. And I'm absolutely blessed and love what I do as much today as I ever have.
Yeah, we got a lot of guys that are trying to break in the business with us at XFL News Hub. So let's get right into it. So the biggest question I get all the time from the CFL fans, XFL fans, was the XFL and CFL talks a waste of time? Yes or no?
Definitely not. And I'll give you a couple of reasons.
For both sides or just for one side?
I mean, I would expect for both sides, but I really can only address it from the Canadian Football League side. I think the fact that they were willing to go down this road spoke to, I think, the membership in the league about how much they had to confront the need for change. And I believe there are some things that they managed to get done during that time that they might not have been able to get done had there not been kind of the existential crisis of the XFL as kind of leverage for that. And I'm talking about things like, revenue sharing, which had been something that had been on the table for a long time. So I think there were other means that they were able to sort of, if we don't do this, we're going to have to figure out this on our own. And I would expect that the XFL conversations were productive, because look, when they ended, people in the league said to me, they didn't know that they were over forever, and I think that kind of remains true. So it wasn't like, what a waste of time that was. That wasn't the walk away sentiment. Look, there may have been some parties in the CFL that felt that way. I'm sure there are. But there were certainly parties that felt like it was really beneficial. They learned things from them. They learned things from us. And who knows what the future may bring. And so I don't think there's anything imminent on that front. But I don't by any means think it was. And I think just kind of presenting the seriousness that the league was seriously willing to go down a path that would have presented such radical change. I think it may have spoken to how deep the league's problems that needed to be addressed, and I think for the most part have been addressed, were. So no, it was, and look at it. This is not really the purpose, but I think as a spin-off of it, you had a ton of Canadian football conversation at a time that there wasn't a lot of reason to talk Canadian football. I mean, you think when that story came out, it was like March 2021. Mm-hmm. We hadn't played in a year. We weren't playing for another 4 months. And bam, did it stimulate a lot of talk. And that's not why you do it. But I think if you're evaluating the question of was it a waste of time, I think you can consider that as sort of a happy byproduct of all that went on. So yeah, I think it was, and hey, I got to go on a Zoom call with Danny Garcia, so it wasn't a waste of time from my perspective.
So one of the products that came out of the talks was this Genius Sports, and I wanted to ask, so you would know, to me, is Genius Sports essentially the 10th owner in the CFL? Like they have 10% of equity in something, and rather than getting a paycheck from the CFL? And can you explain fans what Genius Sports is? Yeah,
I can, and I think I can probably walk you through actually the structure, and I think it's pretty ingenious, no pun intended, on how the league Genius Sports came out how to do this. Okay, Genius Sports is sort of a data analytics company, right? That shows you how to collect data, research it, apply it, use it in ways to reach your customers and, deliver content to them and engage with them. So you can make all of your marketing, all of your approaches far more efficient. So you're not just, putting up a billboard somewhere. You're actually targeting things and bringing people what they want. I just use the billboard because that's kind of old school advertising. So what I'm led to believe is that Genius Sports's services were beyond the reach of the Canadian Football League economically. Okay, they couldn't go out and say, we'd like to hire Genius Sports to take over the data analytics of our league and do this for it. It was cost prohibitive. So that's where the creativity came in, was they said, okay, what if we created a body called CFL Ventures? And this is essentially, the revenues that we're going to try and drive from the league office. And there may be some exceptions or adds to that, but essentially that's what it is. And we have 9 teams in this league. So what if we all took a 10% share and we kicked the other 10% under the ownership of Genius Sports? So there is a win-win that as Genius helps us become more successful and a more economically viable league, they will grow. They will always own 10% of CFL Ventures. So CFL Ventures is producing, I'm just going to pick wild numbers out of the air. If they're producing, $25 million a year, then that's worth $2.5 million to Genius Sports. If they're producing 50, it's worth 5, and so on and so on. The other thing I was led to believe at the time this deal was done was that Genius Sports was interested in using this perhaps as a model for other leagues, because we know that, I'm sure if you're the NFL or the NBA or one of these leagues, you don't need to use this model. You're probably not going to give away 10% of your revenues to a data analytics company, and you're probably just going to pay for their services. But we know there are leagues of different size and scales all over the world. So if Genius Sports could make this model work for the Canadian Football League, it also presented them with sort of a template that they could bring to other customers that can't afford their services. So that's kind of the big picture of Genius Sports, as I understand it.
And so far, I mean, we heard Randy Ambrosi talk about that. He feels that it was a success even for year one, right?
Yeah, and I got to be. This is not revisionist history from the league side of things. I mean, they were pretty clear at the time of the announcement that this is something that will build over time. You're not going to see a dramatic difference in the way the league is marketed or engaged with its fans, kind of in year number one. So I think there's been more kind of stuff happening behind the scenes or under the surface, and ideally the benefits of that, are still to come. And so I say that because it's easy to say, well, wait a minute, we're almost a year beyond the Genius Sports announcement. Like, what's really changed? Well, I think that's a fair comment. I'm just thinking the context of when this announcement was made and the whole Genius partnership was explained to us. It was pretty clearly laid out a year ago that we weren't going to be talking about, the dramatic shifts we saw in the Canadian Football League branding and marketing over the first 12 months.
And so they don't have a say in any kind of other than just this revenue share. So they're not, they can't be like, hey, we want some of these rules need to change or.
No, I don't believe they have, a seat on the committees that would actually affect the game. Now, on the business side of it, if there are business committees that are purely looking at the business model, I don't believe so, because those are board of governors decisions. And again, they don't have a seat at the board of governors table. So they have, again, 10% share of this venture. And I'm sure there are things along there that they're able to participate in. But for instance, things like, let's just take the most low-hanging fruit we can think of. Should we go to 4 downs? That would not be a Genius Sports thing.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of like the boardrooms of the CFL, let's talk about The Rock and this Larry Tannenbaum MLSC. So if you follow The Rock on Twitter or Instagram, it's very much like him working out, promoting his brands, Terramana, all these other things. And out of the blue, you would get these like tweets, and you were involved in one of them where he was kind of defending Larry Tannenbaum. And to me, I was like, what is going on here? So what is the relationship between The Rock and Larry Tannenbaum?
Well, okay. I don't really know, but I have reason to believe that through different corporate connections, through Redbird Capital, perhaps, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, that there's connections there, I think, or there might be. I was just, I don't want to be certain about this, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I think there was a close relationship between Maple Leaf Sports. I don't know that Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment brought this to the CFL. Okay, I've never had anybody tell me that, but they were certainly the champions of it. Okay, and again, the reporting on this one is challenging. So some of the things I'm going to share with you are things I have been told by people I trust, but not necessarily things I know firsthand. Okay, and one of them would be, the question was, well, why did that not work out, that deal in the end? And we never really got a clear explanation of it, but I've been led to believe that in the partnership that would have formed essentially a new league, that a lot of the business decision-making, financial kind of clout in the league would have been in the hands of MLSE and Redbird Capital, and not so much strewn across the 9 franchises of the CFL that all have an equal seat at the Board of Governors table. That there would have been a disproportionate amount of decision-making power in business, with Redbird and MLSE. Yeah, and I think so. Look, I think one of the things that MLSE has probably been thinking about since they became involved in the ownership of the Canadian Football League, now Argonauts 2015, again, first through Larry Tannenbaum and later with his company MLSE, was how do we break through in the football market in Toronto? And it sure looks to a lot of people like MLSE has doubts about their ability to sell the CFL brand of football in Toronto. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to go so far as they've concluded that it can't be done, but I think they have some doubts about that. And there's reasons to share those concerns that go well before MLSE. It wasn't like the Argos were a roaring success and then MLSE came in, or Larry Tannenbaum came in 2015. I mean, they've struggled pretty much for the last 30 years, for relevance and attendance in this league. So I think what they were thinking was, how do we shake up this market? Because we have this football asset called the Toronto Argonauts that loses money every year, and we don't see a path to make it viable and create value out of it. But Dwayne Johnson, that would break through. People know who he is. People in Toronto seem to like 4-down football a lot. So if we went down this road and went to the 4-down game, which people in Toronto seem to prefer, and gave it some real star power with somebody like Dwayne Johnson, I think that really was an avenue that MLSE saw as viable for football in Toronto, and perhaps more viable than operating in a 9-team CFL with a legacy asset in the Toronto Argonauts that doesn't have as much power in the marketplace as it once did. Those are all just kind of things that I'm piecing together. I have not had a conversation across the table with somebody from LSE who says this is what we were thinking. Although, I did one time tweet something to that effect during a Toronto Argonaut game the next day, speculating about what they were thinking. And somebody called me the next day and said, wow, that's exactly what they were talking about. So, I don't think I'm that far off on this. So, I think it really had to do with just them being attracted to, the star power and trying to find a brand of football that they thought might be easier to sell in Toronto. That's what and there's no question at all about this, that MLSE was, I would never say they were the only team that really wanted to partner with the XFL. I think there were shades of gray in that whole thing, but they were definitely the most committed to the idea.
So then you have The Rock comes up to Toronto and he appears at the Toronto Maple Leafs game. They had Rod Peterson saying that, The Rock and Larry Tannenbaum got together. Like, are they just buddies, or do you think that there's anything down like the road that could happen? I mean, we'll put it out there. It's this chatter, internet, whatever, about the Argos jumping to the XFL, which I don't even see how that's even possible. And there's also, let's throw out there the fact that the XFL is looking for some investment money as well. I mean, the USFL is also doing that. Do you think any of those things have to do with this relationship? I mean, it was just weird that The Rock would come to his defense. This is something that he doesn't do.
Well, you're right, but I think he saw Larry taking some, like Larry's, I think been a bit of a punching bag for CFL fans, right? Because and you're going to see some more of that, I think, with what BC is doing right now. Like there are people going to, hey, Larry, like how come this guy can, get 35,000 people to a playoff game? And really has, breathed pretty good life into that franchise over his first full year of ownership. So I think he was coming to his defense kind of as much as anything, which, when you're the most popular movie star in the world, is not something you do every day on Twitter. But I mean, he engaged with me over a grammar tweet. Mine was about grammar. Mine was about bad grammar. That was a weird day. He would text me like, Dwayne Johnson replied to your grammar. Yeah. Anyway. So I think when you talk about a guy who's both men, while they might seem to be from different fields, because Larry's background is in construction, and Dwayne Johnson is, football player, wrestler, movie star. They're both giants in the entertainment industry. Larry Tannenbaum is the single most significant person in the sports entertainment industry in not just Toronto, in Canada. Dwayne Johnson is in the sports and entertainment place through all kinds of areas. So they kind of live in the same space. They obviously came into contact with one another over this XFL thing. And look, I would think I would have some sense if the Argonauts were really thinking of joining the XFL, right? Which I don't believe they are. I don't think it's ever been a serious consideration. I don't know how it would happen, but I think there are people in the CFL, not just Larry Tannenbaum, maybe, that still, are wait and see on that whole idea. And by wait and see, I mean, okay, we've set off on our own. We're our own 9-team Canadian Football League. We've refined things. We've got new partners. We think we can do this, but we haven't deadbolted that other door, right? To just say that we would never have any interaction, with them at all. But I don't think it's imminent, and I think it probably would take a crisis for the Canadian Football League to get back there. No matter how many times you wrap your head around it, you do come back to, some sort of fundamental problems. And I would kind of isolate three of them. One, when are you playing? Which is an issue, right? If you're going to play in February. Two, what rules are you playing? And three, what does it do to the brand of Canadian football if you are kind of some hybrid league? And in some parts of the country, that might be more of an advantage. Like you think in Southern Ontario, where the CFL brand is not, engaging people the way they would like. But in a lot of the country, it could be a negative. So I think those three problems are all going to be there. I can't believe the CFL would end up back in this place without a crisis, which is often, what spurs change in business, right? The last time the league did something radical, and I am old enough to have covered the U.S. expansion era from 1993 to 1995. It was the Grim Reaper that was knocking at the door that fueled that, right? And it got them through a period with some investment from U.S. teams and things like that. But I don't see the Argonauts in the CFL, breaking off and joining the XFL, and I don't see a new league or merger talks happening. I think it's all in the rearview mirror, but I would say never say never.
Now, so for the CFL has essentially, they haven't talked XFL since. Now we talked about like merging leagues, but was there any reaction to what the XFL was doing with the indoor football league, which essentially is like, hey, we can share players and the leagues are on different times. Has any of that kind of been
I think what resonated, look, first of all, to general sports fans in Canada, no. Okay. This is probably restricted to the hardcore CFL football crowd that's, looking at what opportunity may have been there that the league decided to turn away from. And I think there is that kind of thing that every time the XFL does something that might look like would be good to be associated with, you kind of look at it and go, And the one is, it's not so much the indoor league thing that jumps out to me. It's the relationship with the NFL, right? And the hot housing of training players in Canton, Ohio, that they're going to share. And that, in fact, I just drove by Canton, Ohio about 10 days ago. And I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been in the Pro Football Hall of Fame at least 2 or 3 times before. And I don't remember there being like 10 fields, kind of adjacent to it.
Yeah, so they moved that. So they were going to do it in Canton, but it's actually taken the NFL Alumni Academy. We had Dean Dalton on our show. He is there in Arlington, Texas now.
Okay, they're moving to
because of the weather. That was a
That
factor.
makes sense, yeah. And
But
I
there
like
was a ton
Canada
of
the other day.
construction in Canada.
Right. I didn't know whether those fields I saw 10 days ago were related to that. And thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know that they decided to change the geography. But yeah, the point is that the relationship there is about making sure you've got a pool of available players, right? Whether that's the XFL, the NFL, and there's no illusions about where guys are trying to get to, but both leagues are going to need players that are in football game shape. And this is a way to kind of work together. That to me would be something that you look at and say, wow, that looks like a good idea, because, and we may get to this in this conversation, the CFL is going to have a player recruitment issue. They already do. Okay. It's not really affecting them on the field right now, because the players that you recruited for this season were recruited, a year ago or 2 years ago. It's the guys you're trying to get in now to play next season or the year after that are harder to get. And so that, I think that anytime something happens that the XFL looks like it's a good business development, whether it's a relationship with the NFL or the indoor league that you mentioned, or television or anything like that, I think there is, for some CFL fans, going to be that moment where you kind of swallow and say, we could have been a part of that. But, it's, again, at what cost, right? I mean, there's always there's a yin for every yang, but there are people I think that will look at that, and not, obviously there's a strong diversity of opinion on this issue, but there are people that would look at that and say, wow, that looks pretty good, and obviously you see that the tightness between the relationship between the XFL and the US and the NFL, not just in the business arrangements, but the fact that, like, on opening night in the National Football League, who's on camera?
Yeah.
The guy who's the head of another league.
Yeah.
Like,
and he's done it multiple times.
Multiple times, yeah. And the NFL doesn't need to do that. The NFL doesn't need Dwayne Johnson, but the fact that they choose to do that suggests they have a very comfortable relationship with him, I would say.
Yeah. And speaking of, so you got the, I mean, in that
can I interject, give you my 10-second how life would have been different if with Dwayne Johnson? I'm going to just digress if I can.
Sure.
So when Dwayne Johnson tried out for the CFL in 1995, he was considered an American, even though he has a Canadian father. Because in those days, it didn't matter if you had the Canadian father. It was this formula of, like, you have to play 7 of your first 5 of your first 6 years of playing football had to be in Canada, or 7 of your first 12 years on earth. But there was some formula for who was a Canadian in the CFL that was not about citizenship or parental lineage. It was about football and living places. So Dwayne Johnson had to make the 1995 Calgary Stampeders as an American. As we know, he got cut. If he was under the rules of today, he would have shown up to training camp in Calgary as a Canadian and had to make that team as a Canadian. And I think we can say pretty confidently he would have made that team. And he probably would have been a starter. And he probably would have had a decent career if he wanted to. And who knows, maybe he played 15 years in the CFL and never became anyway, I just like to kind of throw that out there of how, the world of sport entertainment might have been much different if the CFL had blessed Dwayne Johnson in 1995 with Canadian status as they would if he was showing up today.
Wow, that is very interesting.
Okay.
That's cool. That world would be a lot different. In the wrestling world, everything.
Everything.
Yeah, wow. So what is the impact of the XFL and USFL? So you kind of mentioned it about the players moving forward, back and forth. I mean, we had some former XFL players or all-stars in the CFL.
Yeah.
What's the vibe with all the organizations about going forward over the next, like, even just this year, going into the XFL draft? I mean, are they really concerned about both of these leagues getting players that would normally might have went to the CFL?
Yes. And I think, fans and a lot of people in the media will roll their eyes when they hear this, right? Because we've heard it before, right? Whether it was going back to the USFL, the original USFL of the 80s, or whether it was, the Alliance of American Football was the one that scared the bleep out of everybody, to be honest. And then when it went down, the XFL kind of didn't scare everybody as much because it was like another paper tiger had, burned to the ground before our eyes. And then the pandemic took out the XFL. So I think there's kind of looking at this kind of two ways. One is people look at it and say, focus on our business. We'll be here after them. They come and they go. We've been here before. And the other is, okay, that's fine. But in the here and now, this is really affecting our business. And one of these days, if one of these leagues actually gets traction and sticks, the CFL runs the risk of becoming a tier 3 professional league. I mean, the league has just kind of by default always been able to count on getting the next best players after the National Football League. It's the second best football in the world. But if it becomes a third option, and like I'm talking to people in personnel CFL offices, they're telling me the last 3-4 months, it is very difficult to get players here. And when I talk to agents, or even when I talk to players, who are in college or, out of college and looking ahead and looking at options, I mean, it's not anti-CFL, but let's just lay down the choice. If you're somebody who's on the bubble and think you have a chance to get into the National Football League, which most guys do if they're, even close to the radar, here's your choice. You go to Canada for $75,000 Canadian, commit to a 21-week season, and you can't even begin to think about going to the NFL until the next season, right? Like, because your season ends in November, your first opportunity is August or end of July the next year, right? You are not eligible to play in that NFL season. Whereas in the NFL, in the XFL or the USFL, you're going to make about 75,000 Canadian translated to US money. You're going to play 4-down football. You're going to be in your home country. Oh, by the way, it's a 10-week season. So on a per week basis, they're paying you more. Your body's going to take less wear and tear, which is important if you're trying to, again, get to the next level. And you're going to get spit out in April or May in time to sign to an opportunity to go to a training camp that summer. So there's a lot of things from a player's perspective that line up that suggest that that's going to be more appealing than the Canadian Football League. The difference is going to be, what are those leagues going to do to pay players long term, right? Is it all going to be, I think, are they going to commit to guys? So you're going to have long-term players in the XFL, USFL, or are these going to be flow-through leagues? And even if they are flow-through leagues where, you're in for 2 or 3 years, you're going to try to get your shot at the NFL. It's either going to happen for you or not. You're out, you're done. You're going to go do something else with your life. Even if it is, and this particularly would pertain to quarterbacks. One of the things we know about it in the CFL is that it generally takes quarterbacks 2 to 3 seasons to kind of get this game, right? Timing's different, angles are different, all kinds of things, the space, everything. And when you've watched a certain type of football on a certain type of field with a certain type of timing all your life, there's an adjustment period. So if we start to get those quarterbacks at 26 and 27 instead of at 22 and 23, and then also that creates a problem, because if you take a 22-year-old and say you may have to back up for a couple of years here in Canada before you get a chance to start, okay, but you say that to a 26, 27-year-old, I mean, that's one of my theories why so few guys that have played in the National Football League at quarterback succeed in this league, because after you've played in the NFL, maybe started games in the NFL as a quarterback, what do you think your appetite is to back up for 2 years in Canada? Not very high. But that's the road that makes you successful in Canada. You can take Cleo Lemon out of the NFL with 14 starts on his resume and make him your week 1 starter, but you might be releasing him by midseason, which is what the Toronto Argonauts did. Whereas if you can convince him to back up for a couple of years, and the same thing with Johnny Manziel. I think Johnny Manziel could have been wildly successful in this league if he'd been willing to give it a year and a half, 2 years as a backup, practice every day, learn the game and excel. But he's a first-round pick in the National Football League. He's not going to do that. Anyway, I digress again. My point is, the earlier you get players, the better. And I don't think this league is in a player recruitment crisis yet, but I think there are people really concerned about this. And if one or both of these leagues stick, I mean, people say, oh, there's always lots of players. Look at college football. But every time you move further down the food chain, right, and you start to look at the players that have made this league great, and you ask yourself, well, okay, if Zach Collaros was coming out of Cincinnati now, where's he going? If Milt Stiegel's coming out of Miami of Ohio now, where's he going? If Ricky Ray's coming out of Sac State now, where's he going? And I think, there's a real fear that the best of the next, as they kind of say, are going to be funneled directly to those 2 other leagues, because it just makes too much sense.
What about a guy, and this might tick off some CFL fans, what a guy like Bo Levi Mitchell? Is there any I mean, he's a Texas kid, right? He's from Texas. Is there any chance, like, some of these, have you been hearing anything about maybe some CFL players coming to the XFL, maybe for him finish up his career playing in the United States?
I haven't heard about that. The only one that it kind of was a buzz about was Taylor Cornelius, because he'd been in the XFL, right? And so he had some success there with Tampa Bay. And I was told that when Edmonton signed him to an extension this midseason, that the XFL kind of shadow was a part of why they pounced to do that in season, and made a commitment to a guy earlier than they might have otherwise. That's my speculation, because he's still raw. I think he's got lots of potential, but he's not the finished product yet. So, but I think that's the thing we haven't, and you may be more up on this than I am, because I don't breathlessly follow XFL news at this stage, but like the question is going to be, what's the salary tier going to be for the quarterbacks in that league, right? And Bo Levi Mitchell, I would think, probably thinks that he can still make $400,000 a season in the CFL next season somewhere. And I don't think those leagues are going to get into that salary sphere. And this is why we say often the danger isn't having the stars of this league drawn to these leagues. It's the fact that we're not going to get them in the first case, because that's really where we lose. When we're standing there offering a guy $400,000 or $500,000 versus an XFL or USFL situation, that's not a problem. It's the entry level salaries where we're going to have trouble competing.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out this week, because there's going to be a conference with some of the football people talking about contracts. And so we'll know Thursday night what those contracts are going to look like. And I do know from our own XFL insider, Mike Mitchell, that 2 players in the XFL did get $1 million. One was Landry Jones, and the other one was Matt McGloin in New York. But whether the other players got, whether it's 500, 800, I don't know about that. But I remember him talking about those 2 players that got $1 million. And look,
that's significant money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
so we'll see if they do that again. Now, one of the other questions I always had was, so you have this USFL coming with Fox backing it. You have Redbird Capital and their AC Milan and all this other stuff that they're Yes Network. How come no one approached the CFL and was like, hey, I mean, the XFL did sort of, but I mean, I know you're talking about in the 90s that they tried to expand the United States. I mean, you have, the 100-year league, it's already established. I mean, it would just be a simple plug and play, add a couple of teams in the United States. We're living. I mean, some people will say, oh, well, it worked. It didn't work the first time. Why would it work again? My argument would be, do you remember the electric car, the Chevy Volt, and now we have the Tesla, and things are a little bit different. And the CFL circles, are they ever thinking of, I mean, especially with the thirst for summer football, really would be in the United States. Is there any thirst for expanding to the United States again?
There isn't a lot. And I know there were been owners in the league that wanted to go back there. Bob Wetnall, who owned the team in Montreal for 25 years, he always wanted to kind of go back down that road. I lived through that era, okay? And I agree with you, because the league was operating so much like by the seat of its pants that there was so much of that era that was poorly executed. I mean, I go on and on and on. I mean, including the fact that the games were on ESPN2, but you couldn't get ESPN2 at that time in any of the markets where the CFL teams, I don't believe. Or it was very limited. And, the schedule wasn't very well promoted. And again, think of the way Americans look at football, right? Friday, high school, Saturday, college, Sunday, Monday, NFL. CFL schedule jumps all over the place. So that in itself was confusing. Then you had the game, which they advertised as, bigger, wider, higher scoring, more exciting. And then they crammed the CFL field into some stadiums where it didn't fit. Like Memphis, they played in like an 8-yard end zone, which is why the scores look like, 13-9 and 16-11. And think like when you're promoting the exact opposite of this, it was not a good idea. So I generally look at the U.S. experiment and say, I don't think you could conclude off of that it's impossible to succeed at this. The problem becomes the fall, all right? Because if you look at Birmingham, Alabama, where the Birmingham Barracudas played in 1995, Matt Dunnigan, my colleague at TSN, was their starting quarterback. Look at their crowds in summer. 25, 30, 32. I mean, they're playing in Legion Field, so it wasn't full, but on television, it looked, legit. Look at their crowds after Labor Day. like Plummet City. And I don't know how you get around that in America. I don't know how you play an alternate form of football in the fall in the United States. And, you know, the thing that I think the CFL is more excited about related to the US than expansion is television. And by that, I mean, even with these other leagues playing in the spring and late spring, early spring, you're still going to have half of June, all of July, and all of August where there's no meaningful football being played, you know, unless you like watching guys. I mean, let's be honest, NFL preseason, even at one point, NFL preseason was legitimate entertainment. It's not now, right? It is literally guys that you want to evaluate, right?
Yeah.
It's not, that's what it is. It's an evaluation period. It's not tuning up for the season. The starters are all in great shape. So, you know, 350 million people. And I remember looking at this years ago. The CFL has been giving away its property to American television for years. And I would look at it sometimes. This is going back a few years. So I remember looking at CFL games on tape delay that were outdrawing live MLS games. And I'm like, well, how come they have a $100 million contract and we're giving away our property if we can put ours on tape delay and beat what they do live, right?
Yeah.
And I may be cherry picking here a little bit, but my point is that there's a reason football is the #1 sport in America. It's because it translates on television incredibly well, and people like to watch it on television, or like to bet on it on television. So, you know, shouldn't you be able to do a decent American television contract? And with the economy of scale in the CFL, you wouldn't have to be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, honestly, if you sold your US deal for $10 million, every team got $1 million for being on American TV. It's 20% of the salary cap in the CFL. You know what I mean? Like the economy of scale between 350 million people in your 9-team league with a $5.4 million Canadian salary cap, you don't have to bring in a lot of revenue to improve the business model. So I know that the league's consultants have been telling it over the last year, you should be able to monetize your US television deal. And their ESPN deal is up this year. So are they going to be on ESPN next year? Or is it going to be a different carrier? Could it be one of these now, you know, streaming carriers, excuse me? I don't know, but I know the league is anxious to explore what opportunities they might have in the US on television, but that doesn't involve US teams. Now, the question would be, if they did do that and they did create some traction, they did create some value, somebody might say, well, wait a minute, if we can be worth $10 million on US TV with no US teams, what would we be worth if we had half a dozen US teams, right? And maybe you get some momentum through that, but that's kind of hard to imagine while you've got these other two leagues still kicking around. You know, I don't know, it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. And well, maybe Larry Tannenbaum can nudge the Rock and be like, hey, why don't you talk to the people at ESPN that you're so good friends with and hook us up with a nice TV deal. But
well, let me ask you a question here. I'm going to turn the table on you for a second.
Mm-hmm.
All things aside, what do you think would be the ideal season for a alternative football league? Because I always think that week after Super Bowl thing is nuts. And here's why, for two reasons. One, I love football as much as anybody. And God knows I spend a lot of my time in my life watching, okay? But by the time I've come through a CFL season, an NFL season, bowl season, okay? And then having 4 weekends pretty much monopolized by wall-to-wall NFL playoff games now with the expanded playoffs, and then the Super Bowl, I'm actually ready for a break. Even me is like, okay, right? I need a bit of cleanse my palate here. And so the idea of rolling out your alternative league the week after the Super Bowl, because that's quote unquote when football interest is at its highest, has never made sense to me. It's literally like saying to somebody, here, why don't you have a big plate of pasta, even though you just ate Thanksgiving dinner? Like, I'm not hungry. That's kind of where I am. Plus the fact that you get the opening week of an alternative football season coming on the heels of the very best NFL teams playing head-to-head over the previous 3 or 4 weeks, which, you know, again, your product's going to look different than that. So I've always thought, you know, the kind of April, May, June thing made more sense, you know, which was why I was excited that if the CFL was going to do a merger with the XFL, it would have to be late March earliest, right? You can't play in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan in February. You probably, you know, you're risky playing in March. You could start on the road, but I don't know. When do you think alternative football should play?
So my opinion is, I mean, so I was with you as far as like, you know, people that burn out, talking with agents, talking with player personnel people, one of the biggest selling points to get players is that when their season's done. The biggest knock I have heard about the USFL is when their season completes. It is not enough time to, even though the USFL was selling that to agents and players, hey, it will still give you time to get into a training camp, which is true, guys did. But a lot of them, some of them were getting hurt because they've just completed a season.
Right. And there's no, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Where you want to have that, the body, even for a 10-week season, needs that rehab. And if a guy has a lingering injury, then he doesn't get into the NFL, where if he had 7 weeks to heal, he does. Got it. Yeah, it makes sense. And I can see from a player and agent perspective why that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. From a fan perspective, I'm still not sure it does.
Yeah. So speaking of fan stuff, so we got the CFL season is coming to a close. We've got championship games this weekend. So where is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers going to be champions again? Or do you think there's somebody out there? How about Toronto or somebody knocks them out? What do you think?
I am very, very excited about the matchup between the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And look, one of the things, and I get asked this a lot, as you can imagine, what kind of football you really like best, you know, like what really, and I always answer this the same way. It's 100% true. I love good matchups. Okay. I would rather watch, you know, Winnipeg play BC than watch, you know, the Indianapolis Colts play the Houston Texans. Right. I would rather watch, you know, the Bills play the Chiefs than watch the Red Blacks play the Rough Riders. Right. Like, and it goes right into college. My identification with football is all about matchups, you know. And one of the things the NFL delivers every single week, because they have 16 games on their slate most weeks, is like fantastic matchups, right? At least 3 or 4 every week that you look at and say, oh boy, that's a game I want to see. And then they take their dogs and they bury them on regional TV, and that's part of the business formula. In the CFL, you know, the best and worst thing about our broadcast is every game is on national TV. That's great sometimes, and sometimes you're like, well, you know, we can't do what the NFL does and just bury a dog on regional TV. And because we only play 4 games a week, we only have 9 teams, we tend not to get these. Well, it's more rare that you get a matchup that you just look at and say, man, that is a marquee matchup. This weekend in Winnipeg, that is a marquee matchup. You know, when you look at that Winnipeg team, that, I mean, honestly, in 3 calendar years, they've been beaten. And I mean, like, beaten once. You know, they've lost a couple other games, but like in terms of a team, like just laying it down on them once, Hamilton, like 6 weeks ago, that's it. Every other game they've won or been close in. Amazing run. And then you've got BC, which has the Nathan Rourke story, which I don't know if people in the US can appreciate how much traction this story has. And one of the things in the CFL, we don't really have superstars where we obsess about them as much. It's more of a team branded league and less about players. I mean, when we had Rocket Ismail here, sure. Doug Flutie, sure. We obsessed about those guys, but it tends not to be a league that we do breathless reporting on players day to day at practice. Nathan Rourke is that guy. Nathan Rourke, he's fabulous football player. That's the first thing. Okay. And people were excited because he was Canadian at first. That's not the selling point anymore. He's the most exciting player to watch in the league. And now you've got this story about him, you know, still got a half limp, and he threw for 320 the other day. You know, him going in to play Winnipeg, which when Nathan Rourke was healthy, the first 10, 11 weeks of the season, the only team that beat the BC Lions, and I mean, I kind of laid it down on them, were the Bombers. So, I mean, like I said, this is the kind of matchup that falls into the National Football League's lap all the time. It doesn't fall into our lap all the time, but it didn't really hit me till the end of yesterday when I realized Calgary was out, because I kind of thought Calgary was going to win that game. And once Calgary was out, I was kind of like, wow, this is an absolute like dream matchup for the Canadian Football League. And you know, the other 2 games, Montreal and Toronto played close every time this year, pretty much. I mean, there was not a lot to choose between them. And the Argonauts are one of these teams that every year they've won a Grey Cup, they kind of just lie in the weeds, you know. And I know it sounds weird to say because they were first place, and they were first place last year, but there's nothing when you watch the Argonauts, even on days they win, where you walk away and go, wow, I don't know how anybody's going to beat that team. Like, they do enough to win. They get the W. That's all that matters. There's only one stat that matters in football: W's. They get, but you rarely walk away from a game and just think, I don't think anybody can touch them. So it's, you know, they're kind of a little bit under the radar, even as a first place team. And I wouldn't be, look, if they had to win 4 playoff games to win a Grey Cup, I don't think they would to do it, but they only got to win 2, and one's at home. So, and I think they'd be hard pressed to beat either Winnipeg or BC, honestly. But I think there's a lot of intrigue with the teams that we have left.
So what do you think, BC or Winnipeg is going to take it? I think for the league, well, I mean, either team. I mean, you have the Nathan Rourke story going into the Grey Cup, or you have Winnipeg going for a third time.
Yeah, I'm not sick of the Bombers yet. And I'm not, like, I don't have any affinity to the Bombers, but there was a time where, it felt like Montreal was at the Grey Cup every year, and I was kind of cheering against them in my head just because, like, oh my God, I don't have anything more to say about these guys, right? They show up every year. And we talk about Anthony Calvillo and Ben Cahoon and Mark Trestman and all that. But I just didn't have anything, as a journalist, I kind of had Alouette fatigue. I don't really have Bomber fatigue, and maybe because it hasn't been that long. And they've made some nice kind of, I think they made some nice transitions and guys they've let go. And then, I mean, I don't know what they're paying Dalton Schoen as American rookie, but when you lose Kenny Lawler, the leading receiver in the league, and he goes and signs for $300,000 somewhere else, and you bring in a guy who you probably signed for 75,000 Canadian, who led the league in receiving. I don't know his salary, but the typical salary for an entry-level American is about there. That's how you win in the CFL. It's good recruiting, and I'm not sick of the Bombers or their story. And we is probably where we haven't had a 3-in-a-row champion since the Warren Moon-led Edmonton teams of the late. They won 5 in a row from 78 to 82 or 83, 82 before Warren. And then 83, Edmonton didn't win. In 84, he's the starting quarterback of the Houston Oilers, and Hugh Campbell's their head coach. So now back to your question. I think BC can win. But it wouldn't matter who it is. This Winnipeg team, coached by Mike O'Shea, well rested,
true, playing
at home. I mean, I can't go against them. I don't. That's just too much that stacks in their favor. And they've been, and Mike O'Shea is one of these guys. I said to somebody the other day, I said, if the Bombers win this year, it's time for us to do a reexamination of Mike O'Shea. And I don't mean that, where does he rank in Canadian football history or president? I'm talking more in Canadian sports. Mike O'Shea was a great linebacker at the University of Guelph. He was actually a teammate of Thomas Dimitroff, the former GM of the Atlanta Falcons. Thomas Dimitroff was a senior safety when Mike O'Shea was a freshman linebacker, because I did a piece on Thomas Dimitroff when he got the job in Atlanta, and I interviewed Mike O'Shea about it because he'd been his college teammate. So they played together at the University of Guelph. He goes to the CFL and has an outstanding career, just a career kind of as a warrior, just one of those guys, in the middle of the defense. And then he transitions to a special teams coach, and he's recognized immediately as one of the best special teams coaches in the league. And since he got to Winnipeg, they were 500, I guess, about his first 4 years, and bless the Bombers for not doing what a lot of teams do and getting impatient. Because I think Mike O'Shea is an absolute first-rate head coach. And if he wins 3 in a row, he belongs in the conversation of great Canadian sporting careers. Not just as a coach, not just as a player, just his lifetime in the sport of football, I think belongs on a very short list of Canadians and what they've accomplished in the sport.
Well,
even if he doesn't win a third Grey Cup, he does. But you know what I mean. The way we recognize things is when we get accomplishments like that.
Well, it's exciting. I definitely have fans out there to definitely check out ESPN2 here in the States. We'll have it. Dave Naylor, again, I appreciate your time talking CFL, XFL stuff, and down the road, we'll catch up again.
Well, as you can probably tell, I love to do this, so we'll do it again sometime.
All right, my friends, there you have it. Dave Naylor, appreciate him coming on the show, filling in all the gaps when it comes to everything with the CFL, XFL, lots of interesting things to break down. And it'll be really interesting as we go after the CFL season's over. So one thing he did mention, we were talking afterwards, was that I believe it was February 15th is when free agency starts for, or players in the CFL are released from their contracts. So keep that in mind as we're going forward, because you have the XFL season is basically a couple days away from that. And so where, could CFL players appear in the XFL? Not right now, technically. Now, whether their teams will allow them to leave to pursue a thing in the XFL, that's going to be the question. So stay tuned. There's a lot to this CFL, XFL, USFL story. Now, the one thing is they could wait till their this could prove to be beneficial for the USFL because these guys could play a full USFL season or CFL season and then leave the CFL and play in the USFL to have a shot at doing NFL stuff. But for the XFL, because their contracts aren't over until, I think he said February 15th, that they can be released, like their season is over and they can kind of move on. That's something to keep in mind in the future. All right, so my friends, long show. We'll wrap it up real quick. Just want to say hi to everybody in the chat room. We'll read a couple chats out here before we get going. Russ says, go Battlehawks. Jared, XFL draft is going to be fun. Yes, it's going to be a fun week of stuff here at XFL News Hub. Super excited for not only for you guys to know me and hang out, but also to get to know the writers here at XFL News Hub, because you will see them out at, I know Matt Lyons will be out at the Seattle thing, so say hello to him. That's this week. And I think we got guys in Houston and like all sorts of places. So be on the lookout for XFL News Hub guys out there. Rookie _X4 says, if the Vegas Vipers can't find a stadium to play, the only option they have is to play in Arlington. And of course, asking, that's Rookie. Chanel, we'll be able to watch the draft? I don't know about that. I haven't heard anything yet. Richard says, when do you think we'll get to see the uniforms? That might not be closer towards the season, to be honest with you, at this point. It's just, the Vegas Vipers is the one thing to be a little leery about. Jared says, that's crazy. Dak Prescott talking to XFL and Renegades. Gotti says, go Brahmins, go. Don says, Vipers in San Diego is not an outrageous idea. Hey, if things don't work out in Vegas, they could always be the San Diego Vipers, but then the season tickets and all that kind of. I just have they have to just be asking for season tickets. You have to have something in the pipeline. But yes, time is running out. Time is running out, and I think this is impacting things like the schedule and because now we don't know what the schedule will be yet because of all this stuff, because they might not be playing in that area. Russ also says, go to San Diego. Youssef says, hey, Mark, I was at Orlando event, met Coach Buckley. I'm excited to be season ticket holder and only one of the new fans of the Guardians. Cool. Youssef, I'm glad that you were at the Orlando event. Oh, man, I was so ticked that I couldn't make it to the DC event. But what can you do? It is what it is. There'll be hopefully more of them. Russ says, I would like to see Toronto Argonauts in the XFL. You heard me and Dave Mail. I asked him the question. I don't think it's possible either. And he doesn't even think it's possible, so you have it there. Jared says, I'll be wearing the XFL 2020 Guardians black jersey. Let's see. William says, we need an Ohio team in the XFL. I don't know. There's a rumor about, I won't even get into that. Maybe the USFL will be doing something. Stewart says, CFL is an established league. Nobody knows if the USFL or XFL will make it. History says no. That's very true. That was one of the questions I had for him. I was like, why didn't the CFL think about coming back into the XFL or to the United States? And, as Dave pointed out, like, well, there's, once you hit that, the football season, the regular football season, when the NFL starts, then the fans will disappear. But at least you're getting those months and you're getting that United States money. And it's going to be really interesting what the CFL negotiation with ESPN and how that will work out. Stewart says CFL. Oh, we got him already. The Husky K9 says, sad to see LA Wildcats being left out. I love going to the games. The other passionate football fans at DH Sports Park. Yeah, that was a shame. Gotti says, go Brahmas, go. Jared says, I seen the old Blue Bomber Stadium when I traveled there. Yeah, so if you didn't check out this Sunday, 1 o'clock and 4:30 on ESPN2. Check out the CFL playoffs. It's going to be a lot of fun. The games were good this past week, and this is going to determine who is going to the Grey Cup. And my wife and I already talked about it. Hamilton Tiger Cats is my team. They'll be in Hamilton next year. So the plan is to go this summer to a Hamilton game, scope it out, and then definitely go to the Grey Cup in 2023, and then head to Vancouver because we've always wanted to visit that area for the 2024 Grey Cup. So, and of course, all sorts of trips, fan control football we want to do, which is in Atlanta, and maybe even head up to Massachusetts for an indoor football league. Who knows? All right, my friends, if you want to be part of the show, email podcast at XFL News Hub with your thoughts. Record an MP3. Leave 888-430-7692, extension 3. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You know how we do that. Again, we want to thank Dave Naylor. And next week, huge week. Tons of content for you guys out there. Quarterbacks, draft, all happening. We're going to be connected the whole week. So join us online to talk about this stuff. Get your thoughts. Super excited about that. So if you have any questions for our roundtable, Mike Mitchell, Anthony Miller, Jay Noakes, Matt Lyons, Brendan Anderson, Pat Ruffino, Evan, Matt Nagashima. I think I got that around 8. And including some other guys too. Hopefully we get Sam and Andy on as well. The whole team will be on there talking XFL draft, XFL quarterbacks. That's all next week. If you got a question for them, email me, podcast at XFL News Hub, or if you even want to record something, message us there as well. All right, my friends, as always, it's been a good episode. It's going to be jam-packed, crazy next week. I'm super excited for us at XFL News Hub and super excited for you guys as well. As you've been out there and we've all been waiting for this moment. It's happening next week. So for show notes, go to xflnewshub.com/XFL-podcast. Join our Discord channel. Our writers are on there. Discord link in there for more to keep this chat going. Thanks for listening. Mahalo. As always, again, God bless you guys out there. And I will see you all. Got to check out my Ravens. Later.